It may feel like a repetitive melody to mention that humanity has endured immense suffering, but this is hardly surprising since pain seems to be an inescapable part of life. However, from another perspective, it could be said that our intelligence and creativity have caused humans to bear more suffering than other animal species, if we accept that premise. The issue of unhappiness and suffering is not confined to modern humans, but extends to all species within the genus Homo, species that, sadly, have faded away on the evolutionary path. While no one entirely agrees on the exact number, it appears there were approximately 14 different Homo species. All of them, except us, emerged and vanished over the past 2.8 million years. Currently, we, Homo sapiens, have existed for about 300,000 years. A span that seems incredibly long, but when placed alongside the entire 3 million-year history of the genus Homo, you suddenly realize how fleeting it is. When contemplating that vast 3 million-year period, you can imagine how different the world of our ancestors and distant relatives was compared to today, bringing with it experiences, pains, and deaths that were entirely distinct. Some of these cannot even be replicated today, not only because the causes of their deaths have disappeared, but sometimes because they are tied to indelible marks, as in the case of this first specimen, the oldest recorded victim of homicide. This skull might initially seem somewhat similar to yours or mine, but it is not, as it belongs to a Homo heidelbergensis, an ancient human species or subspecies that lived during the Middle Pleistocene. And if it's not clear, this individual faced a serious problem, or rather, two problems: massive holes in their head. When researchers discovered this unfortunate individual in a cave in Spain, they immediately realized that these holes were the cause of death, likely claiming their life very quickly through severe head and brain trauma. The only question remaining is what caused them. Since caves are often steep and filled with sharp edges, scientists initially thought a fall had killed this Homo heidelbergensis, with a pointed rock piercing through their head. But if that were the case, it would be hard to see two identical holes, so this hypothesis is unconvincing. The next idea was that an animal might have caused the incident. However, the problem is that no animal in Spain at that time left wounds like these, leading to the final hypothesis. These wounds closely resemble something anthropologists are familiar with: marks from human tools. Specifically, they resemble injuries caused by stone axes, which could produce severe blunt force trauma, indicating this person was murdered. Dated to around 430,000 years ago, this incident is currently considered the oldest recorded case of homicide or murder, evidence that violence was likely deeply ingrained in human history even before our species emerged. Even more surprising, it turns out this Homo heidelbergensis was not alone in their death, as thousands of other Homo skeletons were also found in the cave, some of which also bore signs of being struck on the head. However, none were as ancient as this specimen. Today, it is believed that this cave may be one of the oldest designated burial sites, where the dead, whether from violence or other causes, were cast into. In the case of our unfortunate friend, this early act of violence may have stemmed from a struggle over resources or territory, leading to their death. Overall, this was not a pleasant way to go, but it was likely still far better than what happened to the individual known as 07. 07 was not a Homo heidelbergensis, but a Homo habilis, one of the earliest human species that lived in South and East Africa. Not only were they among the most ancient, but they were also one of the smallest human species, standing only about 1.2 meters tall, making them incredibly fragile, and their lives already fraught with challenges from the start. But for 07, life, or rather death, was not just challenging but brutally extreme. This was a death that cannot be replicated, not because he achieved some unprecedented feat, but because he was killed by one or more creatures that no longer exist, extinct animals. When alive, this individual likely survived in an ancient wetland inhabited by many predatory species. And it seems that on one fateful day, while seeking water, he was attacked by one of the most terrifying things one could encounter: a crocodile, not an ordinary crocodile, but a giant one. More precisely, it was Crocodilus thorbjarnarsoni, the largest crocodile species ever to exist, measuring up to 7.6 meters long and weighing over 2 tons. In other words, a completely unequal confrontation for our tiny ancient relative. Based on the remains, it appears the crocodile ambushed 07, who tried to turn and flee but was caught in the final moment, as his left leg bore large puncture wounds. Some parts of the leg were even completely missing, indicating they were torn off during the attack, which was almost certainly a death sentence in a hot, polluted wetland, even if you didn't bleed out. Yet, it seems nature wasn't harsh enough. In a rare case, it appears he was subsequently attacked by an entirely different predator, a feline, specifically one about the size of a jaguar. This doesn't necessarily mean it was a jaguar, but the creature that attacked him left long grooves on the back of his head, on the parietal bone, consistent with the hunting behavior of jaguars, or at least a close relative. To be clear, 07 did not survive, as neither the head nor leg wounds showed signs of healing. Technically, he may have died from the crocodile attack first, then been torn apart by the feline. But because the crocodile only took a leg and the feline's wounds were in a position related to predatory behavior, some suggest it was truly a double attack. The hypothesis is that after being attacked by the crocodile, he may have turned to face it while trying to fight back, inadvertently exposing his back to a nearby feline, sealing his fate. To be fair, even today, there have been recorded cases of crocodiles and felines competing for prey. However, fortunately, the animals involved today don't include an extinct feline and an unprecedented giant crocodile. So, this death was undoubtedly horrific. But remember, not every violent death is the most painful. Let's explore the story of specimen A, KNMER 1808, a Homo erectus from Kenya 1.7 million years ago, who ran into trouble not with the letter A but with vitamin A itself. Although an essential nutrient, vitamin A can become a dangerous enemy if consumed in excess, and it seems this is what claimed the life of our Homo erectus friend over 1 million years ago. Trust me, it was not a gentle death. Her partial skeleton was discovered in 1974, and scientists immediately noticed something unusual. Her bones showed strange growth, with excessive changes in bone tissue and signs of prolonged severe hemorrhaging, despite no clear wounds. Though it sounds mysterious, researchers quickly found the answer. As the bone pattern matched hypervitaminosis A, vitamin A poisoning, a notorious condition from ancient times to today, and this Homo erectus is the oldest recorded human case. The marks on her bones indicate she suffered from this chronic condition for a long time, and it was ultimately the culprit behind her death. Today, vitamin A poisoning is generally not too dangerous, but likely due to the lack of medical knowledge back then, she unknowingly consumed too much, causing not only bone issues but also symptoms like fatigue, severe headaches, peeling skin, hair and tooth loss, and intense joint pain, reflected in the severe pathological bone growth in her limbs. She likely endured this pain for a long time. So where did she get such a massive amount of vitamin A? All clues point to one main culprit: the liver of carnivorous animals, a notoriously rich source of vitamin A. In some modern predators, like polar bears, the liver can contain enough vitamin A to sustain a person for nearly 150 years. And clearly, not knowing this played a significant role in her death. Although perhaps not as painful as the case above, another prehistoric death would surely make you shudder, simply due to its sheer horror: the fate of the Tong child, 2.8 million years ago. In modern times, when feeling scared outdoors, we often look around, or, if in water, look down. But rarely do we look up. However, millions of years ago, you had to, as giant predatory birds circled the skies, spreading terror across Africa, unafraid to attack humans, or rather hominins, as in the case of this extremely unfortunate Australopithecus. Though it breaks the rule about the genus Homo, I include this case due to its remarkable uniqueness. The Tong child was found with horrific wounds on the face and head, including punctures in the lower eye sockets and deep scratches on the upper part of the skull. Interestingly, these wounds closely resemble those seen in modern monkeys attacked by eagles, suggesting a giant bird drove its beak and talons into the boy's eyes and head, likely killing him quickly. At least we hope so, before carrying him off to feed. But the story doesn't end there, as the boy's death opened a new mystery. The Tong child's skull was a single fragment, meaning his body was never found. Moreover, it was discovered in a remote area of the Kalahari Desert, in a cave containing no other bones, human or animal. This left researchers wondering why the skull was there. One hypothesis is that, after death, his skeleton may have been used by the bird to build a nest, before the head eventually fell and rolled down, coincidentally entering a nearby cave, where it lay for millions of years until excavation. After all this, I bet you'll never look at birds in the sky the same way again. But one thing you've likely always been wary of is water. Though an essential source of life, water can also bring horrific pain. Drowning is often considered one of the most terrifying ways to die, and this is truly unfortunate because it may have happened to an entire group of Homo erectus, or at least what remains of them. Homo erectus was one of the most successful human species, also the longest lived, and the first Homo species to not only leave Africa but settle in Europe and Asia, where they faced their final battle in Asia. From what we know, the youngest Homo erectus fossils, dated to about 110,000 years ago, were found on the island of Java. The strange thing is that they all died in a mass death event. Nearly a century ago, a research team on the island stumbled upon a graveyard containing over a dozen Homo erectus individuals, all adults, piled chaotically together in one spot. With no signs of disease, physical wounds, or old age, it's believed they died simultaneously from a common cause. But the question is, what caused this tragedy? Based on the type of sediment where they were found, scientists concluded that a flood might be part of the answer, with the hypothesis that the bodies were swept by floodwaters down a narrow river, where they got caught in a pile of wood, forming a fossil graveyard. Before fossilizing. However, this doesn't mean they necessarily died in the flood, but could have been swept away after already being dead. Still, it's currently believed that a mass drowning was the primary cause. A more specific hypothesis suggests a volcanic eruption was the culprit, triggering a lahar, a hot and cold mixture of rock and water rushing down the volcano's slopes, causing chaos and flooding rivers. We know from modern times that such events can cause severe damage, spreading over 60 miles and sometimes claiming tens of thousands of lives. If a volcanic lahar was indeed what killed these last Homo erectus, it would be one of the rare fossils showing an extinction event in progress. However, it's worth noting that volcanic eruptions or floods were not the primary reason for Homo erectus's extinction. In Java, the final populations may have been weakened as their forest environment turned into tropical rainforest. Additionally, there's still a chance that younger Homo erectus remains exist somewhere. For now, these fossils represent the last known members, making the story tragic, yet poetic. Thank you for following along, and see you at Ancient Roar.